Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of Stone and Straw, the final episode of the first season of Stone and Straw. I am your host, John Cullen. You can find me on Twitter at Cullen the Curler. You can find this podcast on Twitter at Stone Straw Pod. Make sure to give both a follow. This is it. We've reached the end of season 1. I'm happy to be here. All 6 of these episodes presented by CurlingZone, Dynasty Curling, Hardline Curling. Can't thank my sponsors enough for this first season. It feels like it's gone by so quickly, but it's been amazing seeing all the feedback, everybody sharing it, everyone downloading it. The numbers have exceeded my expectations for this small first season, this first project, this first 6 episodes. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much. I'm actually in Thunder Bay right now. I'm at the Tour Challenge Grand Slam, soaking it all in. I've been doing some social media for CurlingZone. I've also been getting some podcasts done for season 2, and I've got about half of them recorded already. There's some doozies, I have to say. One of my favorite things about doing this is just being in the room with the people I'm interviewing and getting to hear their thoughts and just being there while they're saying it. And it's just been a privilege and a pleasure, and that continues into season 2. I've already had some emotional moments, some really introspective moments, some reflections on some things that I didn't expect, and I know you won't either when you listen to them. It's been fantastic. I can't thank CurlingZone enough for bringing me out here to Thunder Bay to be able to get some of those done, and it's been great just to see all my friends on tour, and the feedback has been amazing. I have to say, there's been a lot of curlers and fans that have come up to me this week and complimented me on the podcast and saying they're enjoying it. And that just means so much to me. I'm not here to toot my own horn, but I just really want to extend a heartfelt thank you, because that's what this is all about. It's been a labor of love. It's been a lot of travel. It's been a lot of hard work. And yeah, just to hear that the top players in the game and people that I really love and respect are listening to the podcast and enjoying it means so much to me. So thanks to everybody who's reached out, who said something, who's shared it, who's been on board with this project from day one. I couldn't do it without you. So thank you for all of that. Episode 6, it's Steve Laycock. This guy, for those of you, if you've ever met Steve, this is going to be kind of a similar intro to Brendan's was last week, because Brendan, I feel like, very introspective guy, thinks curling very well. Steve is exactly the same. You ask anyone and they'll tell you that they think the game next level. And actually, I was exchanging some text messages with Nolan Thiessen about the podcast, and I told him that I was having Steve on, and he said, great guest to have on. Super smart, thinks the game at a level that a lot of people don't. And you really get to hear that when he goes over his whole history in the game. And he's had such an interesting history. He's played virtually every position at the highest level. He's moved up and down lineups. He's had experience playing with older curlers, like being the young guy on an old team. He's had experience being the oldest guy on maybe a bit of a younger team. He just has so much good stuff to say about the game, and he's a good soul. He's just a good person. I know I've said that about a lot of my guests, and I think it's not really a secret that most curlers are pretty amazing people, but he's just a down-to-earth, awesome dude. We did this interview before we played each other, so we knew that it was our first game in Vernon, BC, in the Vernon Cash Spiel, the Prestige Classic there, and we're about to go on the ice. Literally, we finished the interview, we both went out for lunch with our teams, and then we met each other at the club again. He beat me, so I have to say I give him a little bit of a hard time in the episode for beating him last year in Arizona, so fair play to Steve. They beat us in Vernon pretty handily, I might add, so I shouldn't have got maybe so ahead of myself. But again, I think you're going to love this episode. I think you're going to love to hear what Steve has to say. I think when you do a podcast like this, there are some guests that just kind of sell themselves, that they've been in front of the camera for a really long time and people feel like they know them. People like Cheryl and Mark Kennedy and John Morris. And then there are people that have been in front of the camera, but maybe not as much. They maybe haven't done as many interviews, and they're just as fascinating and just as interesting to hear from. And that's what I feel it is like with Steve. And so I know you guys are going to like this. I don't want to ramble on too much, but I will say stay tuned for the end of the episode. I've got a very special announcement about what's going to happen over the next couple of months. So for those of you that have been following along, this is the end of season 1, the last episode, and then season 2 is going to start in January. So we're going to take the Christmas season off, let you enjoy some time with your family, drink some hot chocolate, maybe play in a fun spiel or two. Maybe you're heading to Banff and Canmore for John Morris's mixed double spiel there. Whatever you're doing, we're going to come back in early January in time for the Briar and the Scotties. And I'm hoping we're going to have a bit longer of a second season, maybe 7 or 8 episodes. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for the end of this episode. Once I'm done talking to Steve, you're going to hear an announcement from me that if you're a fan of this podcast, I think you're going to like. That's it. Without further ado, here's Steve Laycock. This episode is brought to you by Hardline Curling Supplies. And I'm happy that it is brought by Hardline Curling Supplies because I'm a Hardline Nation member. My team's been using Hardline for the last 5 years. We were onto Hardline products before they were even on Dragon's Den. Can you believe that? Ice Pad. It's the most technologically advanced brush on the market. You don't believe me? 7 of the top 9 men's teams and 10 of the top 15 women's teams in the world are all using this brush. Kevin Cooey, Brad Gushu, Nicholas Adine, Anna Hasselborg, Reed Carruthers, Chelsea Carey, Mike McEwen. The list goes on and on. And they're great for the rec curler too. Don't just think, oh, I club curl, it's not good enough for me. It's phenomenal for you. It helps with your shoulders. You can use it for over 100 games. When your head wears out, you just throw it in the wash and you can use it again. It saves you money. It helps the environment. And they got a lot of great products too. They've got the best pants. Are you one of those cold curlers who's always complaining about how you're cold? Well, guess what? They've got super comfy and warm pants. They've got great shoes, shirts, helmets, broom bags, whatever you need. And if you were looking for that best delivery aid on the planet, that's Reed Carruthers Pro Slide, which you can get exclusively from Hardline Curling. It's guaranteed for life. Your one-stop shop for all your curling needs. So visit Hardline at www.hardlinecurling.com or go to any one of the 120 Hardline retailers around the world and get your products today. Okay, awesome. Cool. Can you just check on that one?
Microphone check.
Oh, yeah. That sounds good, man. You sound great. So this is a fun one because we are actually about to play each other. I don't know that I've ever done like a media thing where I'm playing the person right before.
Be interesting to look back and see who wins the game here after this discussion.
Yeah, should we exchange some strategy notes? Or the only time, it's actually funny, the only time when I was doing Cullen and a Curler, my YouTube series, I asked Jim if he wanted to be on the show, and the only time it worked, we were in a spiel together in Kamloops, and the only time it worked for us to do it was after we played them. And so I was like, but this is going back in the day. I'd never beaten Jim before. I'd probably played him like 5 or 6 times, never beat him before. So people were like, oh, is that a good idea to do it right after the game? I'm like, well, we're probably not going to beat him. We're like a younger team, like whatever. It's like not a big deal. And I don't care if we lose. It's not going to be a big deal for me to do it after. Sure enough, that was the first time I beat Jim. And then we had to get off the ice and do the interview.
Jim's such a nice guy. He probably did that intentionally just to make it more comfortable for both of you in the discussion.
That is possible. I always feel like there's a reason why when I beat Jim that there's something going on. So yeah, maybe that was it. He was like, oh, if I beat him, he's going to be pretty sad for this interview. Maybe I'll just like let him go. We'll see what happens today. Are you going to let me win because of this, or?
If that ends up being the outcome, that was why. Yes. Yeah.
But we'll just see what happens. I mean, I didn't want to bring it up, but I've had an okay record against you these last couple of years.
Yeah, you guys definitely put us in the pressure cooker there in Phoenix last year.
Yeah, and then we screwed ourselves over. Thanks, John Epping.
Yeah, we got a very fortunate break there on the old tiebreaker scenarios.
Yeah, that's right. You guys got.
We went direct to a semifinal instead of playing a tiebreaker at 9 p.m.
Yeah, we were in the tiebreaker at 9 p.m. And don't ask me how it went, Steve, because it didn't go great. Okay, so we are starting this podcast the way I start every podcast, which is just by asking you how you got started in curling. What's your origin story?
Well, like a lot of people, it was family related. Yeah. So my family played in a family mixed league at the Saltcoats Curling Club. Home of such great curlers as Joan McCusker.
That's right.
That's probably about it. Joe McCusker.
And
me, if you consider me on that list.
Well, aren't you got a billboard, right?
Yeah,
we talked about this on your MQFT.
Shared highway sign in Saltcoats. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Does that do you feel like, oh man, like Olympic gold medalist? Me. She
actually commented that I had to win an Olympic gold medal and 2 world championships, and you just win a juniors and you're already up there. It's like, maybe I should wait till you're actually good first.
But it is, I mean, it's Saltcoats, Saskatchewan. So, I mean, I feel like it's
a curling hotbed, and it's they're very proud of the people that they've had from the town that have gone on to great things, and they've had a few.
So how old were you when you started playing?
Grade 4, so
9.
I'm trying to think about when the season started, because I'm born late October, so depending on when the ice went in that year, I was either 9 or 10 when I would have been out for the first time. And the way it worked is I have 3 older siblings, a couple moved away for school, so they needed replacement players, and I got called up.
So instead of being like a farm worker, your family, it was you get replaced on the curling team.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
And did you like it right away? Was it like an instant kind of thing, or did you have to work into it?
Certain aspects of it. I think the first few games, I just threw my rocks, didn't make any over the hog line, and when it was my turn to sweep the other 6, I just went inside and played with toys for a little bit, so maybe that was a good prelude to, maybe this guy's going to skip a lot in the future. But,
Have you ever bought toys out down there at the other end?
Yeah, it was the first season, probably, it was just cool to be out and doing an activity, and the actual curling part was kind of whatever. I'd say by the time I was in grade 6, so I was really taken to it, and starting to do really well, actually. My dad was letting me skip already in grade 6, and there'd be times where I'm like, okay, I'm going to hit that rock over there, and I'm going to take ice here and throw the out turn. He's like, what do you mean? Like, that would have to fall 4 feet to get there. Like, no, I know I throw my out turn about 4 feet wide, so I'm just brooming for how I throw it.
So you already knew.
When you're in grade 6, you don't throw it real good, so he's got to adjust.
I mean, that's smart that you knew that you had to adjust, though, because I feel like I would be looking at the other sheets being like, well, they're putting their broom on the other side of the rock. I guess that's just what I should do. So you already knew that you were tossing them way out there.
Like, I would make a takeout when I was in grade 6. I had to throw as hard as I could. Whenever I did that, I would throw it way wide, so I'm just broomed for it.
That's really good. So you said you have older siblings, and none of them took to the game like you did, really?
My youngest of the older brothers went to the gold medal game at the Canada Games.
Okay.
When he was back, that was back when it was 1700. I don't know if it still is. And it was actually the only game they ever lost as a team was the gold medal game. They lost to Ryan Wernick, who's Ed Wernick's son, and never played together ever again because their junior teams were kind of just the way the ages worked out. They just joined up for this one run.
Okay, yep.
So yeah, he had a really good run there. He played, I think they came close to going to junior nationals once or twice, and he still plays in the leagues, but yeah, he never really played on tour or anything.
Gotcha. So you've mentioned that you pardon me, were a world junior champion. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because that must have been a pretty cool thing for you. Not only you obviously winning the World Juniors is great, but then you did it in the same year as another Saskatchewan rink, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so that was a Marlies Miller,
yeah.
Now Kasner, yeah. So that must have been pretty, like, did that make it even more special or make it a bit of a different experience knowing that both of you were there representing Saskatchewan and then having success at the World Juniors?
Yeah, it was actually really neat. And it was one interesting side story to that one too is we always have this Regina Christmas spiel, junior spiel between Christmas and New Year's every year. And during that spiel, our 2 teams, at Mike Jansen, who was my second that year, were staying at his uncle's place and he had a hot tub in his house. And so our 2 teams were there hanging out, and it was actually Tammy Schneider, who was playing on a different junior team, and Ben Hebert, who we ended up being the provincial final that year, were the 2 other people that ended up over having a party that night. And those ended up being the 10 people that would go to the World Juniors that year, because those ended up being our 5th players as well. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. If we'd have known 3 months in advance like that was going to be, it would have been a pretty interesting thing.
A bigger party.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, we were really good friends, the 2 teams. Like, we hung out, we went to a junior spiel in Winnipeg together that year, the 2 teams, and practiced a lot together. So yeah, it was pretty neat to have that experience right from the pre-regions or qualifying balance bills right through provincials, Canadians, and worlds.
So is that, because I've talked about this with a few other guests that I've had on the program, when you win the World Juniors, pardon me, and then especially in a province like Saskatchewan, did you feel like making that transition into men's, that the expectations were different for you or were higher, just maybe in general, or even the expectations you placed on yourself? Because I feel like when you have that success in a curling mad province like Saskatchewan, it's something that, it gets brought up a lot.
Yeah, I feel like there was a little bit of that, I think. I think part of why that didn't carry through is we didn't end up playing together after juniors.
Right.
So we Mike and I went and played with Brad Height that first year of juniors, and Chris Heikert and Ben Hebert were playing with Pat Simmons right after that. So I think if we had stayed playing together, there would have been that, okay, how's this team going to do now that they're out of juniors and playing together? But it never actually ended up happening. We did that. So I think that maybe changed that situation a little bit. I also remember Ben Hebert's grandpa, 2005 Brier in Regina. So we had won the World Juniors 2 years before, and Ben's little brother, Critter Hebert, and playing with Cal George, won the World Juniors in 05. And Simmons' team was doing really good that season. And then they go 0-4 or 0-5, whatever it was, to start the Brier that year. And he said, I thought the future curling in Saskatchewan was in good shape. Now I'm not so sure.
And so you're like, oh, shit, this is partly my fault.
Yeah, I don't know if I was taking ownership for it at that point. I think he was placing the blame on the team currently 0-4 or 0-5 with the Brier that year. But yeah, I think there was a few people expecting that big things were coming for Saskatchewan. We did have some good moments, obviously. A few years after that, when I was playing with Pat, we made it to the 1-2 game at the Brier, and if not for a pick on his last stroke, we would have been in the Brier final, and then you never know what happens, and a few other good runs. But yeah, Saskatchewan seems to have trouble getting that big moment to break through at a national championship. Ever since 1980, it's been a long time.
Yeah, no kidding. So we talk about that expectations coming out of World Juniors, and you didn't do that well, like results wise, after you win the World Juniors. You were, yep. It took you a little while to get going. Did that, like, how do you not keep yourself going, but was that something that was really frustrating, or did you just kind of know that this is just the way it goes sometimes? Because again, like you said, you see your junior teammates, they're doing well, they've won the provincials, and you're just kind of not having that success. What was that like? Was that very frustrating for you?
Yeah, it came in waves too. I mean, the first year of men's, so we just won the World Juniors, and then go out and play with Brad Height at the time in the tour that fall. And our very first event, we lose a C qualifier. Dave Bomer made a shot only Dave Bomer can make, because I think it wasn't possible unless you slid way tight and threw it weird. So he makes this incredible shot, and it's like, oh my God, is this what's going to be like? Like someone just ripping your heart out in a C qualifier? But then the next event, we play in Russell, Manitoba, and we play Pat Simmons in the final, and we win our first ever World Curling Tour Bonspiel. And then the next weekend after that, we're in the SGI, and we beat in, I think it was Mark Dacey, who had just won the Brier the year before. Then we beat Burtnick. We beat Wayne Madon in the final. So it's like, okay, this is maybe what it's actually like in men's, if you can win some games against these top teams and then qualify to A or next weekend. Then we went on a bit of a drought.
Yeah.
But we had a really good season that year. We made it to the Tour Championship, lost provincial final in an extra end to Bruce Kody. And it was kind of the next season where things weren't a little rougher, and that our team ended up breaking up by Christmas of the following season, and actually picked up Kyler from my old junior team, and we made provincials still, and but didn't have a very good showing there. I think we finished in last. And the next year in men's also, we didn't have a great year, but I was lucky enough on other curling endeavors. I won the Canadian University Championship that year. So it was always just enough there where it was like, had just enough success where it's okay, there's just enough reward coming here where it's keeping me interested, keeping me motivated. And then obviously when I started playing with Pat that following season, we started to have some really good runs. So there was some lean times there where it makes you question why you're doing this, and then we had to persevere.
That's my whole career, Steve. My whole career is lean times. We're at 33. We're trying our best though. But you talked about, you alluded to playing with Pat Simmons, and the first year you play with him, you move all the way down to lead. Oh. And I feel like that is not something we really see that much. And especially not now. Like, I feel like right now it seems like the hot skips and juniors, the ones who are winning the world juniors, whatever, they stay skipping or they stay playing back end. What was that like? Like, how did that even happen? Like, when Pat approached you, was it with the idea that you were going to play lead? Did you see this as like, oh my God, like I'm getting demoted? Like, how did you feel about that, having, I guess, been a skip your whole life, right? Or pretty close to?
Yeah. So actually, well, right out of juniors, actually, my first year in men's, I actually went to lead playing with Brad Height. Okay. So it happened a little earlier. And to be honest, I felt it was a good fit. I mean, the shots I'm the best at are the ones you throw a lot at lead. The strategy of the game in curling really is like, your strategy is determined on your lead stones. So that aspect of having been a skip and knowing how important setting up the strategy of an end is at the lead stones, you can, as long as you get the rocks in the right spot, your second can miss a couple and you guys still have the end set up kind of a certain way. But if your lead screws up, your end's over instantly. So it wasn't like I went into with the mentality of the lead being an undervalued position, especially when I first went to men's was the first year the 4-rock rule came into. So that helped a little bit as well. But some of it is, I've always been a guy that looks at a situation thinking, would I rather be a lead on a team that has really good potential or a skip on a team that I know is going nowhere? And I've had a few times where I've had to make that decision, and you can obviously see from the past record how I've chosen in that situation. So I've been the one that tilted towards where's the success going to be, and not having the ego get in the way. So
did you get, like, were other curlers saying things to you? Was there a sense of, people almost bugging you, being like, oh, you're playing lead, like, what the hell, Laycock, like, what's going on? It's funny. It's easy to play lead for a team when you're winning. Yeah. And actually, even when I was playing with Pat, it was one of the best seasons I ever had playing lead. Was a season that we were just terrible. That's the life of a lead, right? We had just made it to the Brier semifinal the year before, and I came out the next year and probably had the best year I ever had playing lead, and we qualified in like 2 out of 10 bonspiels that tour season. And so that's where there's got to be a lot of trust that the other guys on your team are putting the work in and performing. Not that was the issue that year, but knowing that I can put this effort in as long as the other guys can hold up their end, I have no problem with it. But if perhaps I could do a better job at what's going on, not saying it was the people in the team that were the issue, but just the situation wasn't playing itself out very good. It's tough for sure. And so, because I think there's a sense, like you sort of touched on it a little bit, but I think there's a sense that people have that, that lead is easy, that it's like any skip at any time could just be a lead. And I've said for years as a lead that I don't think that that's actually true. I mean, I do think there are some skips that can do it, but I know for me, what I've heard from a lot of skips is, playing lead is boring. You're just doing the same shots all the time, and you don't have as much influence on the game. When you're a skip, it's like you're making the shots that win games. And when you're a lead, you're not really. I mean, like you said, you're making the shots that set up an end, but was that one of the more difficult parts for you? That just the idea of knowing like, well, I've got to go out there and play my best, but I'm not having that much of an effect on the game. Going from winning the World Juniors to, okay, well, I'm just throwing at an empty house now. Yeah, I think that's back to my point about you need to be in a situation where you feel the other guys on the team are able to perform their roles at the level required to win. Otherwise, you maybe are better off being in a situation where you have more control over it. But if you get with the right group of guys and you're having fun and that you can find success and you can be a big part of that, I think it's fine. And there's a huge element of being a lead that isn't throwing. That's why the whole, I'll just put a skip at lead. Well, yeah, you may have put a really great thrower at lead, but how much better are they going to be than a different lead they're playing against on those shots versus how much you might be giving up in them
actually being the proper team guy, because they're probably not going to be happy in the role long term if things go south a couple weekends. And usually skips aren't going to walk in and be the best sweeper on the team. So you want your lead to be one of the best sweepers on the team. So that's why it isn't a natural fit. And that's why every role demands different things, and certain people line up to those roles better or worse.
So what was something that you thought you had to do to be that good teammate as a lead? So when you get that call from Brad Hite, he's like, hey, I want you to play lead. What are some of the things that you felt, okay, I've got to do this in order to be a good fit at lead and a good teammate?
I felt a big thing with that particular group was it was an opportunity to learn from someone. Brad was one of the best strategy guys out there in Saskatchewan. And one thing, looking back, playing with him, just how good he was at reading ice. Like a lot of people I've played with, it's like, you see them put the broom down and it's like, I'm not sure I would have put it there. Where with playing with him, it was like every single time he put the broom down, like, yeah, I think that's the right spot. Like I can throw this confidently. He's got the broom in the right spot. If I throw this good, I'm going to make it. Just like play a whole season with a guy and maybe have once or twice the entire season you didn't think the broom was in the right spot. That's
impressive.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So you learned. I saw it as a bit of a learning opportunity for sure. And also with that being the first year that 4-rock rule came into men's curling, I thought it was a good opportunity for me to really hone some of those skills and see how that's going to transition the game. So that was a lot of what I focused on that year. And also I wanted to just become a more rounded player, and being able to play with Mike Jansen, who was the second on my World Junior team, who was a really good front end guy, to learn from him about sweeping and judging. It was a really good way to transition to men's curling, I thought, without all the pressure that would have come with skipping after having won a World Junior Championship too.
Totally. So you alluded to your best year at lead was maybe not a great year for the team, and then you start to make your way back up the lineup. So how does that happen? Because you went from lead to third, if I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah. So that's how we labeled at the time, and curling historians will say I actually went lead to skip because I was skipping and throwing third, that next year. So yeah, after that 2010 Olympic cycle, Jerry wasn't planning to continue beyond that, so Jerry Adam, and so Pat and I were still thinking about playing together, and we found a couple young guys. So Brennan Jones was one of the top guys out of juniors recently in Saskatchewan at the time, and very talented player, and that's when I first started playing with Dylan Myers, and he came in and played lead for us that year. So yeah, I went up the lineup there, and we had a really good year that year, actually. We had a great year on tour and won provincials, and didn't have quite the Brier we were hoping for, but overall it was a really good year. And obviously Pat moved on after that season to go play with Kody, which was a great opportunity for him. And that's when I started skipping kind of full-fledged.
So when you sit down and have that thought of like, I'm going to go back to third, what goes into that for you? Because we talked about preparing to play lead. Was there kind of a sense of like, oh boy, I'm getting back to back end? Like, yeah. Did you feel ready? Was that something you thought about? Like, okay, I think after this year, the Olympic cycle's over, I want to go back to back end. Like, was that something you really pushed for and wanted, or like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I think definitely it would have required a really good team for me to not be wanting to play back end, and realistically there wasn't that in Saskatchewan. Like if I was going to be on a good team, I was going to have to play back end. That wasn't a time where people would go duck out of province the way they do now to get situations. So it was basically you look around who else is in the province, and I wasn't planning to relocate to Curl, and it was basically, I know there's Pat that's really good, and aside from that, there wasn't another guy where I was like, I'd be comfortable playing under that person, go forward. So that's kind of where it came from.
This episode of Stone and Straw is brought to you in part by Dynasty Curling. Dynasty Curling is a Canadian company that has been around since 2015, changing the landscape of curling apparel, both on and off the ice. And my team uses Dynasty. We're repping the Dynasty clothes out there. They're super comfortable, super nice, and we're not the only ones who use them. Obviously, Olympic and world champions, Team Jennifer Jones, Team Chelsea Carey, Team Gushu, Team Adine, Team Cooey, and many more. If you follow them on Twitter at Dynasty Curling, you can see their insanely good roster. But what a lot of people probably don't know is that Dynasty also creates a lot of curling products for off the ice as well. It could be hats and hoodies that just have the Dynasty logo on it, which look great. They have gear to support your favorite team or your favorite province at the Brier or the Scotties. And they also have workout gear, which is really cool too. So you should obviously check them out, and especially check out that apparel. You probably didn't know. You probably just think, oh, it's only this sublimated curling gear I see on the ice. No, they have awesome off-ice stuff, and because they're really sweet, they have a deal just for you for listening to this podcast. If you use the promo code STONESTRAW at checkout, you'll get 10% off your any purchase you make of Dynasty off-ice apparel. So that's pretty amazing. So head on over to dynastycurling.com, enter in the promo code STONESTRAW, and you'll get 10% off your order of Dynasty off-ice apparel. And if you live in Winnipeg, they just opened a retail store, so you can check that out at the Granite Club in Winnipeg, or check them out online at Dynasty Curling on Twitter, Instagram, or dynastycurling.com. We talked about, you're talking about playing with Pat Simmons, and I had Mark Kennedy on this show, and he talked about how, you know, for him being a young guy, playing with older guys was something that really helped his development. Mm-hmm. And he said that that was crucial to getting him to where he is now. So you've already kind of talked about Brad Hite. What was Pat's contribution to your overall career? Because I feel like playing with him for you seemed like that was what kind of got you into being the, you know, the fantastic men's player that you ended up being.
Yeah, so
I should say. I like that I said being, like you're dying or something.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how that game goes today. Maybe I am done. No, it was for him. It was one of those quiet leader by example type situation. You saw how meticulous he was in his technical skills, how well he had practiced being able to throw the rock, especially like his peel 8 shots. Like there's very few guys in curling that can just like effortlessly, and he's not a big guy.
No,
just effortlessly throw those huge peel 8 shots without looking like there's any strain when he's doing it. He could just do it like for hours, it seemed like at that time. Maybe not with his knees nowadays, but back then it was just his mechanics were incredible. So that's one thing I wanted to get better. I was coming out juniors, I was more of a artistic, feel it out kind of player. If that's,
I like the word artistic. That's nice.
The way to put a positive spin on it. And that's one thing I definitely had to change to the precision required in the men's game nowadays. You can't just feel it out there. You're not going to have the consistency. That's one thing I had to really improve was my technical skills. And even today, it's still a work in progress. I don't think you can ever get good enough at that. It's striving for perfection, but being satisfied with good. Otherwise, you'll be too hard on yourself sometimes too. So that was a big part taking away from that. It was just the amount of precision that was required at that level of men's, especially the game was changing around that time frame, getting more precise. And that was probably the big takeaway from that period playing with Pat.
So this is another interesting thing that Mark said, and this is something I've noticed as well. So it seemed like when we were coming up, you and I are pretty close in age. When we were coming up, it was, that seemed like the thing that was done. That older curlers, they would have their time playing with people their age, and then especially the back end skips and thirds would pick up the young junior players to play front end and to kind of have it that's their sort of baptism getting into the men's game. And it feels like that's not really happening anymore. It's either like really good skips are coming out of juniors and they're staying at skip, or like it just seems like every time, like we just saw a huge Olympic cycle shuffle and it's just all the same guys just on different teams. Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's been this movement away from, I'm going to pick up the really good front end junior players to play front end for me? Do you think that there's a reason for that? Why do you think teams are maybe reluctant to do that now?
I think there's a few reasons for that. One, I think it was a little different on the business side of curling back in the day, and just the preparation of teams coming out of juniors. So I think someone like a Wayne Madog going to play with Russ Howard, like how that would have changed his first few years of men's curling, going to play for a guy that's won the Brier and is getting invited to skins games and that type of thing, versus trying to slug it out his own way. Like they can get pretty expensive and grueling to do that. So I mean, having a guy established, I think that was part of it, where the people in juniors now, they play their last few games on the junior nationals on TV. A lot of them have gotten out and actually played on the World Curling Tour. You see they got sponsors on their jackets. Like we had our last year juniors, we had I think someone covered half the cost of our matching jackets was like our sponsor. So
yeah.
So, I mean, that was a little different.
Give you a couple $100. You're
Yeah,
like, hell
exactly.
yeah, we're rich.
Yeah, it was going to cost us $400 for the jackets. Now it's only going to cost us $200 for our jackets because they gave them with their logo, but still charged us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I mean, that's a big part of it, and just I think you see junior teams when they finish juniors now, they've got 7 years of working with a sports psychologist, nutritionist. They work out in the gym, and they've got great coaching, and they know the strategy of the game. Where it used to be, you could get by in juniors without that kind of stuff happening and be successful because no one else was doing it. But now every good junior team's doing that. So
for sure.
And because they've been doing that for 4 or 5 years, by the time they get to men's, like they're pretty much ready. It'd be the same in the ladies' side too. I'm sure. Like I'm not as familiar with like some of those transitions, but yeah, you like. Well, I played with a couple of guys recently, like Matt Dunstone coming out of juniors. Like he was as ready as you could imagine. I mean, there was a few things where it's kind of you just learn the tolerances of the shot. Like I know one thing for him, especially having been a skip, it was all or nothing on his draws. He's either perfect freeze or it's like bounce off back 8. And it's like, no, it's a freeze is either a freeze or a couple feet short. It's not a bounce off. So it's things he picked up really quickly. And the guy like him just understanding the how to throw those big weight shots to make them versus just hope for them. He understands the angles. Like he just came out of junior so refined and such a polished guy as far as like the team aspect of it too. A great teammate. So you see guys like that, and it doesn't happen by accident. There's obviously some good people had been involved helping him get to where he was, and I think that's the case for a lot of people now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so let's move on. Let's get back to your career. So you, like you said, you play third for a year, but call the game, and then Pat moves on. You go back into skipping. Was there any reluctance there for you on that? It had been so long since you'd skipped, or did you feel kind of like, yeah, this is the right time for me?
No, the timing was good. I mean, there was never a good time to lose a player of Pat's caliber, obviously, from your team's roster, but the timing was good. I was ready for that step, and the timing worked out good. We had a couple good guys in Saskatchewan, just won a Canadian Junior Championships. We were lucky to get Kirk and Colton at the time we did, and there was a lot of growing required because of the age of a lot of the guys on the team, but it happened quickly, and we put a lot of work into that, and it was very intentional. So yeah, it worked out really good. So
that's it's great, because that was literally my next question. You're talking about putting a lot of work in with those guys, and I've known you for a long time now, and you seem like the type of guy to me. I think that there are some skips where in some teams that the chemistry aspect of it is not, they don't care as much. It's sort of like, I just want the best 4 throwers and we'll figure it out when we get out there. And you seem like the type of guy that focuses a lot more on the chemistry aspect and on having the right group of 4 guys. So first of all, is that fair to say? And second of all, how do you build that? Like you say, you've got these young guys coming out of juniors. You've played with Dallin for a long time, but Kirk and Colton, they're kind of new commodities. What does that look like? How do you go about building that chemistry?
Yeah, so I mean, all things being equal, you want the team guy, but talent has to be there. That's the minimum. So I won't consider anyone for a team without at least the talent part. But we actually, it's interesting. I've worked with a sports psychologist for quite a while. It's Ralph Schoenfeld. He's had a lot of success. He actually used to play in the CFL. Like, he's a good athlete himself, but he's done a ton of work on the sports psychology side. And one thing that he was big on, there's this test called the TASE test. It's 144 questions. It kind of profiles people, and by testing people on that test, you can usually have a pretty good indicator about how they're going to work together, how they would complement each other. If you have 2 people that are power hungry and need to be in control of situations, those 2 people probably can't play together unless they're both skipping somehow, which doesn't work on a curling team. So
what? We don't have 2 skips yet?
And I've actually had like situations with former teams where it's like you saw that play out. It's like you could just tell the 2 people were fighting for the same role, and it just was it can work when you're winning everything, but as soon as you start losing, well, someone's going to want to take the reins from you, or you from them. So yeah, that has actually, and then there's a lot of assumptions that Test makes about, in these types of situations, this person will likely respond that way. And then you see that play out time and time again with that person over the next few years. So it's been a really helpful thing. And working with a sports psychologist like that, you can be really intentional and proactive about how to make your team work well together instead of just hoping for the best.
So was that something that you would actually sit down with the team and say, okay, you answered this way on the test. This is a thing that I think you need to be mindful of. And
this is what you said about yourself, because that's the important thing. It's the self-assessment. Right. So here's what you said about yourself. So it's not like we're saying this about you. You said this about yourself, and here's where that could be beneficial or detrimental to the team, and how we could avoid getting those situations. And we do a lot of plan A, plan B, plan C. Plan A, there's not an issue. Plan B, the person realizes it themselves and fixes it. And plan C, we have to intervene. So we talked a little bit about that. Before it ever became an issue, we talked about how to deal with it.
And so is that something that's hard to do? Because I don't know that there are necessarily a ton of guys that would be like, okay, I'm down to sit around a table with 3 other dudes and have them tell me that I'm a piece of shit. Not that you're saying that, but like, I think certain personalities would see it that way. Like, why are you being like this?
Well, 2 comments. One, I would say a lot of teams, especially men's curling, probably didn't have the same comfort level having those conversations as we did, but partly it was facilitated. It wasn't like we naturally did it ourselves.
Sure. Yeah.
But realistically, those conversations end up happening anyway. But in the heat of the moment, when someone blows a fuse, because it's gotten to the boiling point, and we were having those conversations before it got to that point most of the time. So I think that was a benefit.
Okay. Now, this is, I'm interested in this because I would say that right now curling, there's a very clear strata in curling. I think anytime you look at the world rankings or whatever, you can see there are 3, maybe 5 teams that are clearly at the top. And then you have another group of 10 or 15 that are right there. And then you have the rest. And so I would say my team is in the rest. We're sort of like an upper middle. It's easy for my team to say, okay, these are the things we could do to get better. We only play in 6 events a year. We don't really travel that much. Like, there are clear steps we can take to get better. Yours was a team that you did all those things. You were doing all the things that the top 5 teams were doing, but it seemed like you just never could quite get there. And I don't mean that as an insult. That just is the way that it is. Yeah. What do you think? So for me, like I said, I feel like the gap between the upper middle and that top 10 is easy to see what you have to do. But what do you think was the difference for your team that you just never were quite able to break into that kind of top level?
Right. A few things. So the best season we had is that group was 14-15. And that's year we made it to the bronze medal game at the Briar, won the bronze there. And I think we finished 4th on the CTRS, 5th in the world. So, and you think back to that season, we had a final shot loss in a Grand Slam to Brad Gushu, where he made like 2 beauties to beat us at the end. And it was the first year we started actually winning Bonspiels. And the difference between that season where we were having that great success and some of the seasons where we were just like top 10 instead of top 5 was probably a quarter shot a game, half shot a game. And the difference between playing 84% and 86% can be about 20, 30 grand and titles. Yeah. And it's just razor sharp. And to be honest, some of it you need to have some breaks go your way too, which we certainly had at certain times. I feel like we were poised pretty well, actually, to have that 15-16 season go really well. And it went, in all honesty, it did go well. Still made it to the Briar, had an okay showing there. I think we were like top 7 in the world that year. But I think we were poised to make that next big jump. But that was the season where the broom thing came out, and we didn't take, even though we were using some of the brooms that allowed us to do that early in the season, we were not using them in a way that was giving us the same advantage some of their teams were getting. And we were really slow to adopt and get onto that. even in our provincials, like everyone was using it against us, but they were doing such a poor job of it. It almost reinforced that maybe this isn't actually what everyone's saying it is. So,
right.
So that season, I felt like we were poised to make a big step, and that we didn't benefit as much as some teams did from that situation. Then the next season, I feel like we had another pretty solid year, but we ended up losing our provincial final that year. I think if we would have got to the Brier that year, we were playing well enough, we could have made some noise. And it got to the point where it was just like, we put a lot into it. And I think the guys were just like, okay, it's enough. Like, that's kind of when Colton left the team, and we ended up picking up Matt. But you just see like that heading into that trials year, there wasn't the same excitement or motivation to go after it like there had been in the previous season. So it's one of those, without having that breakthrough moment, I think it can get pretty tough to sustain that.
And so is that frustrating to you? Like, you look back and you think, we did all the things we need to do, and it was like a quarter shot here, a half shot here. How do you, like you said, you had a trouble staying motivated, but even in that 15, 16 year or whatever coming after your hot, like, how do you stay motivated? Just looking back on your season going, man, if like one or two things just went our way, we could be winning, we could be going to the Worlds, we could be winning the Brier, we could be this, that, winning our first Grand Slam, whatever.
I think that's an individual question. For certain people, the love of the game will get them through. For certain people, like, their legacy as a curler is what they care about. For certain people, I don't know, maybe it's actually just literally winning the extra few dollars you get at the end of the season. For some people, it's a real struggle. It's like, I'm doing this, but I'd rather be focusing on career or starting a business or starting a family. Like, there's all kinds of things that creep up in any curler's lives that can steal that motivation from you. So it's a really individual question. It's not one size fits all answer to that. So individually for you, Steve Laycock, how did you stay motivated? For me, it was about knowing that it was a little different for me than some of the other guys. I'm kind of approaching that make or break point in career where they're looking, whatever, if we don't win this cycle, I'll play the next 4 Olympic cycles. Where for me, it's kind of like this past one and probably the upcoming one are probably just looking at age, skill, matchup. It's probably the 2 best chances I'll have. So the motivation level of knowing that can I sustain this for another 1 year or 4 years, depending like how many cycles you go, it's like, yeah, I think I can do that, or no, I can't. So that's a little bit different versus someone who's got their whole 15, 20 year career ahead of them yet. So I'm looking at this as if not now, I'll look back with regret if I don't give this all I have right now. So
right,
where certain people may not have that perspective yet.
So then, we don't have to get into all the details of Colton, but is that something then that you look back and you go, oh man, that kind of pisses me off a little bit, because that was like one of your last shots. In your words, you say you might have maybe 1 or 2 cycles left, and you have a guy on your team who is in that position, who's got maybe 4 or 5 left, who leaves the team. Like, what? Like, how does that happen? Like, how did you cope with that?
Well, 2 things, I guess. One, do I think our best chance of having our best performance at the Olympic trials that coming season would have included Colton on the team? Yes, I do. Do I understand his motivations or why he made the decision he did? Yes, I do. So I don't have any ill will towards what he did, but it certainly impacted our chances and our ability to, really, it would have been just putting the last few pieces together on what we'd been working on the last few years versus a complete reboot. No discredit to Matt. He was a great teammate, great fit, and played really well for us, but in a lot of ways it was starting over on a lot of the aspects of what we'd been working on, which is tough to do in the last year of Olympic cycle, obviously. Especially when all the other teams they're already into it, and they have that adjustment. Yeah, I understand that. It just seemed like such a strange situation because, pardon me, the way it was painted was that he didn't want to curl anymore at first. Like, I've lost my passion for the game, I don't want to curl anymore. And then a month later, he's got a new team. So yeah, and there's no curler ever actually retires. So, I mean, it's, did he retire from curling? No, but did he retire from putting the amount of work that we were putting into it? Yes, I think they took a different approach. They just played a few spiels. He's playing with a couple very talented curlers, but he was playing with his buddies, and they had a fun first, but still competitive attitude, and they had a really great year.
Yeah.
The year they had is actually a big reason why he got the opportunity he does with Kody. So if I were to say I'm not curling anymore, it would still probably include me playing a few spiels and entering playdowns. So it's not like there's three types of curler. There's the one who's giving it everything they have, the one who's still really loves the sport and still wants to keep doing it, and there's this person that completely walks away, and very few people actually do that.
That's true. Yeah. So is this, let's go, we'll get to that in a second. I last year, so you bring on Matt Dunstone and you kind of almost right away move out of skipping or throwing last. You're always skipping, but because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you started throwing last, right? And Matt was throwing third, and then you switched. I had heard that you just kind of said, you know what? I don't even like throwing last anymore. Is that true?
That is not true.
No. So what happened there?
I felt like the way we were configured wasn't going to be optimizing our lineup. I still thought I could do it and still was confident I could do it. We weren't getting the consistent performance throughout the lineup. And I thought, if you think about the way, and we also talked about, there was a struggle because it was a new team, figuring what's going to be the right game plan for the team we're going to use. The game plan the guys were most wanting to play was not going to be conducive to me being the best guy to throw last. And it wasn't going to be conducive to the people who would be setting up the shots a certain way. So I felt like, just given where the team had been gravitating towards, that it was the right move to maximize what we were going to be able to do going forward. Certainly wasn't an issue of me thinking I couldn't do it. And in fact, like later that season, I went and spared with Botcher's team, and it was a more traditional, you just come and be Brendan for a week and we'll just be our normal roles, and it was like seamless to go back and throw last, and we made playoffs at a slam with a team I hadn't played with before. So it wasn't that I felt I couldn't do it or wasn't still able to do it. It's just that particular lineup, that mindset of the team, we just weren't getting the execution or performance we needed right throughout the lineup, and changes were required. And it wasn't an instant success. I mean, we did it at the first event in Penticton and lost a tiebreaker there, and then we next event was at Trials, and I would say like we had some really great moments, but it was a sub-performance week for us. So, but then the second half, kind of the break we had heading into Christmas and after, we were actually really good. So yeah, it worked out okay.
So who makes that call? Was that all you saying, I don't think I should be doing this anymore? Or?
So the first person, I'd been talking a little bit about what was working and not working with our coach at the time. And he was on board with a lot of what I was saying, although he didn't expect I was going to take it in the direction I did as far as how they actually manage that. And I also checked in with Kirk first too, just because what I was recommending required him also moving down a position. So I wouldn't have done it if he wasn't comfortable with the proposed move too. And then obviously to make sure Matt was okay with it. I wasn't suspecting he would be uncomfortable, but I wanted to make sure he knew why we were suggesting it. And that he knew that if we did it, we'd be supporting him, knowing there would be some growing pains with him throwing last. And everyone was on board. So that's kind of how it just happened over the course of a couple of weeks that we had break between the one Grand Slam and the Penticton event.
And so we're almost wrapping up here. Just a couple more questions. You talked about playing with Matt Dunstone last year, and you've mentioned it a few times throughout the interview, but I just wanted to talk about that. Did it feel a little bit like it was coming full circle for you? Like you start out as the young hot shot playing for Pat, or for playing with Brad and then playing with Pat. Did you kind of feel a little bit of Matt comes on the team and now you're all of a sudden in that role? And how did you prepare for that role? Maybe taking some of the things that you learned from Pat and Brad? Yeah,
I think there was definitely, when he was playing second to start the year, it was one of those, just seemed like he was giving it his best, but it just seemed like a little bit of a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. Like it wasn't the best fit for him, and he wasn't just like walk in and replace. He wasn't the right guy to have asked, probably, if we're asking him to just walk in and replace a guy at second. And one of those things where you probably look back in 15 years, I'm pretty optimistic about the type of career Matt's going to have. If you look back in 15 years and say, you had that guy on your team and you just threw him in at second, like it's one of those things too. So I think it was a lot of fun actually for me that second half of the year, just being in the house with him and like seeing a guy his age, I mean, there was a few times you could tell there were some tense moments out there, and he was feeling the pressure, especially in I think our provincial finals when it showed the most, like, because we got a big lead and we were slowly kind of letting them back in the game, but still had control. You could see how tense it was getting for him, and just help him. The experience we had from having been in that moment so many other times, just helping us stay calm around him and say the right things. And I think that's probably a big growth moment for him, and he's going to be a lot better. And the fact that I was able to contribute to that will give me some pride when I see him winning stuff in the future.
Do you think that that's a relationship that may continue a little bit in terms of, I mean, I know you guys are going to be somewhat rivals, like they're in the Spiel this weekend too, but is that something that you think you could see, keeping that relationship down the road? Or was it just kind of like, we played together for a year, I taught him what I could, see you later?
When I was out here in BC, Matt was also out in BC.
Yes.
And we still made a point of getting together, and he'll always be a guy I'll want to make sure I chat with at events in the future. Like, became great friends. He spent a lot of time living in my basement last season, so we bonded. So, I really, if there's any way I can contribute to success, I mean, obviously when we're playing against him, we're going to try and destroy him, but he's a guy.
You'll directly go against his success?
Yeah, I want to see him be successful. He's a really good guy.
Nice. Okay, last thing, we'll wrap up with the Olympic trials last year, because you've obviously been quite candid so far, and I just wanted to get your perspective on that, because I think there was a sense going in, even from a casual observer, that, well, maybe this isn't the best Team Laycock that could have been here, and I'm not even talking about Colton now, but just moving on, like, how did you guys feel going into the event? Was there a sense of, well, maybe we're not quite where we want to be?
There would have been no way to have not had some of that feeling, just the fall we had. Like, right. We had not been playing well, and we had just made a major switch in our lineup to attempt to address that, but didn't really have the time to truly get that all ironed out too. So it would have been a real Cinderella story if we could have got on a roll and actually started winning, but realistically, we were not in a good place where that was going to happen. I think if the Olympic trials had been played in March of last season, we may have had a realistic chance to get on a roll. But at that time, we were just not performing at the level. And it was unfortunate timing. And there was lots of stuff contributing to that, as we've talked about. But we were not the best versions of ourselves at that time. And so
is that something that, rather than the negative, saying like, do you have regrets about that? Like, what do you learn from that going forward? Because like you said, this might be your last Olympic cycle. You've been in a few Olympic cycles now. What does last year teach you?
I think just knowing, not just individually, but as a group, what your team needs to find that spark and have that motivation to drive. It was almost like as soon as the Olympic trials were over, a weight was off of us and we started enjoying the second half and having different goals and getting some momentum. So I think that's part of it too. And you hear that from lots of people. It's like the people make the Olympic trials bigger than it is. And if it's your driving factor for 4 years, then when you get to that moment, you're going to make it bigger than it is. So I think you've got to approach every event the same way. And that's going to make your tier 2 events seem bigger, which is good. It'll probably be more motivated for them, and you won't get as worked up or anxious about the other ones. So I think there's some pros to that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate you sitting down with me. We have to go curl against each other now in a couple of hours. I hope it just goes well for both of us. Maybe we'll tie.
That would be great. So we can each get into the playoffs with that tie, the extra half point.
That would actually help.
Avoid tiebreakers. So yeah, that'd be awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. I will give you a chance now to plug any sponsors or anything like that you want to. You got a new squad. You're playing with Jimmy Cotter. Sponsors you want to thank?
Yeah, so I got 2 teams of sponsors to mention.
Oh, yes, because you're also playing with Kristen Streifel.
I don't know if you've allowed enough time for this.
I have. Oh, absolutely. I always allow the time.
We'll start with the men's team. So we have All West Glass. We have New Floors Penticton. We have Goldline Curling Supply. And we have Kelowna Toyota, who have given us a nice ride to drive around in this week. So
beautiful.
And for the mixed doubles team, we have Grain Millers. We have AC Flooring. We have Saskatoon Disaster Services, We have PetroCare.
Is that for after you lose? Saskatchewan Disaster Services?
That's for the other team, actually. It's counseling services. They're not disaster relief construction. They're actually counseling services for the other team. And then we have IHG Holiday Inn.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve. Best of luck this season, except for in 2 hours and at the BC Provincials. No, I'm just kidding. I'm looking forward to playing you a bunch this year, and thanks for doing this.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right. Just as I said, just as advertised, Steve Laycock, smart dude, great guy. Love him. Awesome guy. And I loved that interview. I think that when people are introspective people and they're also not afraid to share those thoughts, it really comes across, and Steve's one of those guys. I can't thank him enough for doing that. It's going to be a long list of thank yous. Then it's going to be my special announcement. So again, thank you to CurlingZone for presenting this podcast. Thank you to Dynasty and Hardline Curling for sponsoring this podcast. Make sure that you check them out. Dynasty's got that great discount code Stone Straw for any off-ice apparel on their website. So make sure you check that out. I've got to thank my theme writer, Graham Wright from Tokyo Police Club. Check out their new album, TPC. My producer, Daniel Cuzzetto. He's done all of these. He's a great dude, known him for a long time, super talented. Thank you to Dan for doing all these episodes and putting them together out of the goodness of your heart. Thank you to my graphic designer, Kody Audette, another good friend of mine, comedian in Vancouver, very, very talented graphic designer. Love everything he's done. Thanks to all of my guests, John Morris, Chelsea Carey, Mark Kennedy, Cheryl Bernard, Brendan Botcher, Steve Laycock, for all taking the time. I don't think that any one of them really knew that they were signing up for over an hour of conversation with me, but they all gave it to me, and it was fantastic. So thank you to all of them, and thank you to you for listening and sharing. It means the world to me. Like I said, the download numbers have been phenomenal. The followers on Twitter, just the messages I've been getting, you guys have been so supportive and so fantastic, and I appreciate it so much, more than you could ever know. If you are listening to this podcast and you love this first season, please share it. Tweet it, Facebook it, Instagram it, whatever you got to do. It just means so much to me. I know that if you're a curler and you're listening to this, you have a lot of curling friends that would love this. So please share it. You can follow me on Twitter at StoneStrawPod, at Cullen the Curler. Okay, special announcement for the next couple of months. Once this episode is done, wrapped up, you can go online. I've set up a Patreon for this podcast. It'll be at patreon.com/stoneandstraw. I'll share it out on my Twitter and everything as well. What Patreon is, for those of you who don't know, is it's a donation website, so you can donate to me. And this podcast is not cheap to do because all the interviews are in person. So as I've said before, I've traveled a lot. I got on a ferry to interview John Morris. I spent 13 hours traveling to do one interview. I've flown to Alberta. I've flown to Thunder Bay. It's not easy to do, to get these in-person and intimate interviews. So your donation would just go directly to helping me get more guests on the program, get me traveling, get people to do this podcast. And in exchange for that donation, if you donate $5 a month, you're going to get access to bonus content. That's right. If you're a big fan of this show, bonus content is coming up. It could be in the form of additional podcasts. It could be in the form of a newsletter. I'm going to be starting a Stone and Straw curling newsletter that just kind of have my thoughts about curling, maybe some links to some interesting curling things that I've been reading or enjoying. You won't get access to that newsletter without this subscription to the podcast. It's just going to help me so much with doing this, help me buy new equipment, everything like that, just to keep this show running and keep it as good as you want it to be. So if you're a fan of the show, if you listen to all 6 episodes and you want to throw me a few shekels in exchange for that, I would appreciate it greatly. And you're going to get a bunch of awesome bonus content. All of that will be outlined on the Patreon. So please go to patreon.com/stoneandstraw. Consider donating to the show. Anything helps. $5 a month will get you access to all of the bonus content around this show. It would mean the world to me. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for supporting me in season 1. Thank you. Goodbye.